Our Savior displayed on a criminal's cross. Darkness rejoiced as though heaven had lost. But then Jesus arose with our freedom.
No, I didn't understand that. Never had a. We would say sadya sad. You guys are gonna be killing me.
Sunday night. This is exciting, isn't it? I cannot see any of you.
I know, isn't it amazing?
What is happening?
When you stand right here, you don't realize that you are really under the spotlight.
Wow, I could never.
Are we streaming?
Oh,
Good.
hi everyone.
Awesome. Hello,
Really?
everybody at home. Go ahead, Beck.
We have Mark Eikost here from Bosnia. Hi, Mark.
Yeah. Hello.
How was the trip?
Good. Today I came in a really fancy car.
Yeah,
With-
what kind of car?
It was a Tesla.
Whoa, I wonder who brought you.
It was Pastor Pete. He
Oh,
brought me.
really, Pastor?
And we were on those backcountry roads, so we tried to do one of those things where you relive your childhood. So we pretended we were at Cedar Point Amusement Park, and we were on a roller coaster.
I believe it. Where is he? Gotta find him. Oh, he's in
I'm
the
just
sound
kidding.
booth.
Sound booth.
There he
He's a
is.
great driver. I'm just kidding. But that might be fun. We should try that sometime.
Oh my goodness. He does not need any encouragement. Neither does Mark. And neither does Sam Patane. He's around here somewhere. Be
Yeah, I
careful.
met
Watch out
Sam.
for him. You met Sam. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other fast drivers in the audience? Gabe? No? Okay. No
Jesse.
Gabe.
Jesse's a fast
Jesse?
driver. Jesse drives. Yes,
All
he
right.
does. Yes.
Well,
One
we
more
are
year.
very excited for tonight. We've been waiting for Mark to arrive, and he got here a little bit ago. And we are glad that you joined us online because you are very much a part of our mission celebration, which begins right now at 7 o'clock. We're going to have Mark all the way through Wednesday night. So make sure you join in again Wednesday night during Elevate time. He's going to share with us his heart for Bosnia and how to do discipleship. I don't like that verb. Let's choose a different one. How to be discipleship. I don't know how to say it.
Develop a culture
Of discipleship. I've been
Amen.
listening on Wednesday nights, Pastor Jim, and he's going to share his heart for Bosnia through discipleship. So join us at 7 online on Wednesday, and we're going to start by introducing him. But first, let me tell you, there's a missions love offering, okay, out at the table. It's an envelope. We always bless our missionary with a offering when he is finished speaking, he or she. So that's out there if you'd like to pick that up. You can put it in the offering boxes in the back or the offering box in the foyer. And then we have both a children's and an adult Great Commission Fund, which Mark has been talking about these for 3 or 4 weeks now. So make sure you grab that, prayerfully consider how to support our missionary because we know it's very important. This is how we support missionaries worldwide, the Christian Missionary Alliance. We do not raise support, but we have the Great Commission Fund that gives money and keeps our missionaries on the field. So those are also out there, and it's called this year Unfinished. That's our theme. All right, so we thought a fun way, I actually got roped into this. Mark's like, how could we introduce Mark in an interesting way? And of course,
It's okay.
he's got me up here too. But Mark, when we first met, so we're going to do it through a little trivia. Mark, when we first met, do you remember the first time you met us? Because Mark and I do.
Well, let me think. I remember when I came to Skopje for a leadership meeting, and I stayed in your house.
Okay.
But I don't know if that's the very first time we met.
It wasn't. It was not. You were actually in a car. It wasn't a Tesla. But you picked us up for a field forum. We were the new missionaries on the field. We were in Macedonia. You were Bosnia. And we were going to where? Where was our field forum?
Was it in Baška Voda?
Yes, I think it was in
Croatia.
Baška Voda.
Baška Voda, Croatia. And the car was so little. The only thing I remember about you is that your knees were like like up to your chin because it was a tiny car and you were so tall. And I was in the back seat and Mark was in the front. And you guys looked like that cartoon with the big people in the front of the car and then a tiny car. Sorry. Do you remember that?
I don't.
Oh, that's the first time we met.
I'm trying to think whose car that was. Was it Trent's?
Well, you said to me that it was a rental car.
Oh, maybe.
Probably
It was
you
a
rented
rental
it.
car.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Right. Okay. So, just for you guys to be aware, we were a part of the Balkan field, which was made up of 3 countries: Bosnia, Kosovo, and Macedonia. And of those 3 countries, we were one field, and there were a whole slew of marks. All right. So,
But I was marked number 1.
you were mark number 1, and I don't know what number I was. I was at the bottom. So.
Then came Mark Byram, Mark Shady,
Yep.
then you,
Yep.
and then Mark Mindek. Didn't Mark Mindek come after you?
No, I am Mark Mindek.
I mean, Mark Brinkman. Mark
Wait a
Brinkman came
second.
after you.
Wait a second. I gotta see if I am who I am. So
Mark
I gotta-
Brinkman came after you.
Yes, yeah. Mark Brinkman came after
there
me.
was 5 of us.
Yeah, there was 5 marks in the Balkan field.
And
so-
they all had wives that ended with a Y. He's Mark and Kathy,
Yes.
then Mark and Becky, Mark and Debbie, Mark and Libby,
Mark
Yes.
and Patty.
Mark and Patty. We were all
yeah,
wives.
Yeah, we were all. So we always thought that was sort of funny. You know, here is this of all of us coming together under the umbrella of the Christian Missionary Alliance, and we were all marks. There were 5 marks. And the irony of some of our currency was
Called marks.
Deutschmarks, which was pretty funny too. But anyway, so which was your favorite mark? Just kidding. Don't answer that. Don't answer that. Not here. Not here. So anyway, you had another question.
Well, getting a little more serious, what is something, you're doing the other funny one. Wait, you go first with funny and I'll get serious. Remember the squatty?
Okay. So in the Balkans, in that area, they didn't have toilets.
Well, some people did, but
Some-
not all places.
Some did.
Yeah.
So what was your first experience
With us.
seeing a squatty potty?
That probably would have been at a gas station.
Okay.
Because the older Yugoslav gas stations, Energo Petrol, they would have the old ones. And it was just a porcelain square with a hole in the middle and 2 places that looked like you place your feet. And you just put your feet there and you do your business.
Yeah.
Right, and
There was toilet
we
paper.
called it squatty potties.
It was
That's
squatty
what we
potties.
called them.
Yeah.
Yepers.
Yep.
So anyway,
I'm sorry.
that was
That's
on
kind
a
of
light
embarrassing.
note.
Well, and I used to describe the Balkans as the place where different cultures collided. So you had the collision between capitalism and socialism during the time of the Iron Curtain. You had clash of Eastern and Western Christianity. The lines of the schism go right through there because you have Orthodox on one side, Catholic on the other. That's where Islam came and collided with Christianity there. And it's also the dividing line between people that have sit-down toilets and people that have squatting toilets. So
And there was some connection between all of that some way,
yeah.
which made our jobs really interesting on how to share the gospel in that kind of a culture. So we say that seriously, but we say it jokingly, but we also say that seriously because we had to be creative. And how do you, in a kind way, but also in a direct way, share the gospel in those things? So anyway, Becky has a more
Well,
serious.
just on the toilet, before I get to the serious part, I want to add my little 2 cents here. Remember you had to pull the string, how you flushed
yeah.
it? And I thought it just would flush down in the hole, but it didn't. It flushed the whole area.
Sometimes the whole floor would get wet. That's true, yeah.
And your feet
Yeah.
had to be out of the way because you never knew where the water was coming from. So it would be like this, and then you step back. So you make sure that you're all done up before you step away. But anyways,
Yes,
we're all done with
that's
that.
true. That's
now,
true,
Getting
yes.
a little more serious.
Okay.
Tell us about a heartache that you have for the Bosnian people. I know we're flipping to serious.
You know,
quick.
this last term, Kathy and I know a family in Zenica. We lived in Zenica during our first term, and we helped plant a church there. And we've gotten to know a number of the families in that town. But there's one family that I've spent a lot more time with this last year. And the woman came to Christ years ago, and she's a pillar in the church. But her husband still has not. And in fact, he's a devout Muslim. But I've been spending more time with them. And over the last few years, I've been hearing some of the stories of what he endured during the war as a Bosnian soldier at the hands of people who claimed to be Christians. And just some of the horror stories I heard from him. And so my heart breaks because I want to share Christ, but I know he's got this huge barrier, and so just keep praying.
Thank you for sharing that. That's hard, but our hearts ache, even as you guys going throughout life in your communities have these friends and these people you're sharing with. We have these heartaches for our friends and for those that we love. And so I just wanted to hear who right now and where your heart is.
So, Mark, you and Kathy have been in Bosnia for how many years?
22. Well, we've been missionaries for 22 years.
Missionaries
Some
for
of those
22.
were home assignment years.
Right.
So
Right.
technically
We connect it
18
all.
or something.
We connect it all together and say it's 22 years. So, 22 years, lots of things we've seen. Some of it we were there, and so we got to see some of that. But lots of, I'm sure, highlights. And football has started up back in the United States, and you have these clips from these great plays where people say these are the highlights of the game. And so if you could sort of like remember and think of a highlight of your experience, you and Kathy's ministry in Bosnia, could you think of something like what would be like a major highlight for you guys that when you think of Bosnia and you think of your ministry and you think of what you and how God has used you guys over there, what would be something that just jumps out at you as a highlight of your ministry that you're going to say, this is what I want people to remember, or at least what I remember saying.
Yeah.
I'm saying this on your behalf, what you remember about your ministry that you had in Bosnia.
Well, Kathy and I would joke that we would work with people in the local context, and then we would leave for Field Forum, or we would take vacation, and while we were away, people came to Christ. And it's like, in a way, we're like, hey, why can't you do that when we're here? But on the other hand, we're like, wait, they're still coming to Christ. We were a part of that. One person planted the seed, another person watered, another harvested. So we're rejoicing in that. But the cool thing about that is we're seeing that, the church is the church, and they can be the church even without us, which is great. But so just when we were in quarantine this last time, we flew in Syracuse on the 2nd of July. We're quarantining for 2 weeks in Rome. We get a message, Svetislav and Nevena have accepted Christ. And Svetislav and Nevena have been coming to my home group for a year, Wow. And so I'm excited that they came to Christ and really happy. But then I just looked at Kathy. I said, see, it's happening all over again every time we leave.
You just got to leave more.
Yeah, exactly. So the Alliance needs to give us more vacation so more people will come to Christ.
Well, what a ministry you guys have had, and I don't want to take from your time because we said he had a whole hour and we just took 10 minutes, so you can use that. We can end at 8:10. We'll be okay. Nobody's going to go to sleep. But
They
Mark,
might.
we appreciate your years of
Yes.
service. You and Kathy encouraged us so many
Amen.
times with your love for us and for opening of your home and your life and your hearts. And we are praying for Kathy too. She's actually at Geneva Alliance, right? Thursday.
Comes in.
Comes on
after
Thursday.
this,
Now she's
yep.
in Watertown.
She's in Watertown, comes in Thursday to Geneva. So if we want to catch Kathy, we can go out to Geneva Alliance and see her. But thank you for being here, and we just want to hear your heart.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Yeah, put it over there. This is my space. All right. Well, I mentioned that the guy that I've been spending some time with, and just a lot of the things that he's experienced, and he's a Bosnian Muslim, but his family and their ancestral land is in the Serbian part of Bosnia, and I have a short video. Is that the next slide, or the slide after that? Yeah, go ahead and play that. Hi, I'm at a hilltop overlooking Visegrad at a monument called the Russian Cross. Has a real strategic view of Visegrad down below, and the River Drina Valley and the old Drina Bridge. And at this monument, they commemorate the volunteers who came during the Bosnian War to fight with their Orthodox Christian brothers. Most of the volunteers were Russian, some were Bulgarian, some were Romanian and Ukrainian, and some of them lost their lives here. And if you know people in Bosnia that come from the Bosnian people, the Bosnian Muslims, they consider those people to have been a threat that came to exterminate them and to mistreat their women. And so when Serbs look at this monument, they see heroism and bravery and camaraderie and loyalty. But when a Bosnian Muslim looks at this monument, he sees hatred and bigotry and discrimination. And in that way, this monument and the blood of the fallen Russians and other Orthodox Christians is a dividing monument, one that divides people. But I'm here in Bosnia-Herzegovina because of someone else's blood that was spilled, the blood of the Lord Jesus Christ. And his blood cries out for forgiveness for all the people of Visegrad and Bosnia-Herzegovina, whether they're Croat, Serb, Bosnian, Roma, whatever their nationality. Jesus gave his blood for them. He loves them that much. And he's a good king, a merciful king, and he wants his subjects to know him. So pray for us, for Kathy and I, and for all the people that we work with in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, that we would be filled with his Spirit, and that God in his providence would give us divine appointments to meet people who are open and ready to hear his good news. Thank you for being our partners in this ministry. Those of you who are partners by giving, those of you who are partners by praying. In either case, your partnership is valuable to us. We thank you and we love you. Goodbye. So when I arrived up there, I said, oh, this would be a great place to shoot a video. And the thoughts just started coming, and I wish the thoughts would have started coming after I had a chance to catch my breath, because it was a steep climb. I passed a goat herder with his flock of goats, and I passed through brush and underbrush and trees to get up there. But when I finally got up there, it was a great view. But it's when you're down below in the valley, you can look up and see the cross. And Serbs, it's a symbol for them of patriotism and and camaraderie. But when a Bosnian Muslim looks at it, it's a symbol of treachery, and it's a shame. We have to show a lot of love and pray for deep healing for Bosnians, so that the message of the true cross will penetrate. And so please help us with that we'll continue to have a good witness and testimony. And yeah. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, Mark, do you have a laser pointer? There. All right. That's the slide I want. Good. Mark's going to bring it up for me. Thank you. So, as you can, I'm looking at the back here, and it's hard for me to read that, so you might be having a difficult time depending on how your eyesight is. Red dot right there. Red dot. All right. Just some general facts about Bosnia-Herzegovina. First of all, this on the right 1/3, well, this here in the middle is an outline of Bosnia-Herzegovina. And up above that is an overview of the European continent. So if you could find Italy in the European continent, just cut over to the east across the Adriatic, and that's where Bosnia is. And these countries, Slovenia, where the First Lady's from, Croatia, Bosnia, Serbia, Kosovo, and Macedonia were all part of the former Yugoslavia. So at one time they were a large nation in southeastern Europe, and they had the third largest, I think, army in the world. Fourth largest, sorry. Only the United States, Russia, and China had a larger military than Yugoslavia until Yugoslavia broke up. Mark mentioned the Balkan Field. It's called that because we are all on the Balkan Peninsula. I already pointed out the Italian peninsula here, but if you follow the Adriatic Sea down to the Mediterranean, and then follow back up into the Black Sea, you see that this is a giant peninsula too, because it's a piece of land sticking out into water. And so this whole piece here is called the Balkan Peninsula, and it got its name from the Balkan mountain range that cuts through part of that peninsula. So all of the countries between the Adriatic and the Black Sea down to the Mediterranean are part of the Balkan Peninsula. Capital is Sarajevo, here, and that's where the '84 Olympics were. The 1980 Olympics were not far from here in Lake Placid, and then 4 years later in Sarajevo. The population is 4.5 million approximately, and it says here languages Bosnian, Serbian, Croatian, Albanian, and Romi. Well, there are more differences between British, American, and Australian English than there are between Bosnian, Serbian, and Croatian. They're virtually the same language. They have a few words that are specific to them, but we even see that in the United States. Mark was offering for me for dinner today soda, and I said, "Do you mean seltzer?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Oh, you mean pop." You know, two different words for the same thing, but we understand one another, right? And it's the same thing here. They'll have certain words that are their own, but they understand one another freely, unless they choose to pretend that they don't understand. And there have been times when we've been in one part of the country, we'll be in a Croatian part of the country, where they say kava for coffee. And if you accidentally ask for kafa, they will pretend not to understand you, because you're supposed to know Croatian. Croatians say kava, not kafa. So, and there's little things like that that are kind of irritating, to be honest. But we understand that they have a lot of their own ethnic pride, and I appreciate that. And they also have bad memories from the war, which gives them sometimes a hard edge, and we understand that. So we often will apologize and say it the other way. But it still strikes me funny, because I know that they understand me, but they'll pretend like they don't when they do that. And not everybody does that, but some do. So it says the language is up there, Bosnian, Serbian, Croatian. And then look at ethnicity and race. Can you guys see that in the back? Is that clear for you guys, where it says ethnicity and race? It says Bosniak, 48%. See, you have Bosniak, Bosnian. Serb, 37%, and Serbian language. Croat, 14%, Croatian language. And then it says there's also some Romi and Albanians mixed in. Romi are the gypsies, but most of our Roma are settled gypsies. They're not travelers. They have a home. They might have a garden, goats, cows, or whatever. Some travel to work in the regional markets. The markets travel from one town to the next throughout the week. So in our county, on Monday, the market is in Breza. On Tuesday, it's in Eliash. On Wednesday, it's and so it rotates. And so those who sell and trade goods, they will follow the market around, but they still go back usually to their same home every night. So that's our Roma, or gypsy people. But if you look down at religion, Muslim, Orthodox, Roman Catholic. If you notice, the percentages on those kind of follow the ones up above for Bosniak, Serb, and Croat. And that's because the main difference between those ethnic groups, it's not their genetics, It's not their family line. Sometimes their families have the same last name because a couple centuries ago they were the same family. The difference between the different ethnic groups is where their grandfathers worshiped. If they were Muslims, then they self-identify as Bosnians. If their ancestors are Serbian Orthodox Christians, then they self-identify as Serbian Orthodox. And if they're Roman Catholic Christians, they self-identify as Croat. Even if their family was located in Bosnia-Herzegovina for 500 years, because of the connection with Catholicism, they'll identify as Croat instead of as Bosnian. And if you go up to Lake Placid, a number of local restaurants have been bought out by Bosnians. And I went into one a couple of years ago, and I said, hey, I heard you guys are Bosnians. Where are you from? And the guy said, Podgorica. And I thought to myself, I said, Podgorica? That's not Bosnia. That's the capital of Montenegro. But then I realized, in the same way that a Bosnian Catholic calls himself a Croat, a Montenegrin Muslim won't call himself a Montenegrin. He'll call himself a Bosnian because he identifies more with Bosnian Muslims than he does with his neighbor who is an Orthodox Christian. And that's hard for us to understand because we've grown up and gone to school with people from different backgrounds that go to different churches, and we still consider us one another Americans. We don't look on another person and say, oh, you're not an American because you go to that church, or you're not an American because you go to that church. We consider everybody to be Americans. But for them, religion and ethnic identity is a much bigger tie. But you will also notice that the percentages for ethnicity are a little bit more than the percentages for religion. And that's because in each one of those groups, you'll have some people who are honest, and when the census comes, they'll say, I don't really practice any religion. Or they might even say, I'm an atheist. But because of their family background, they'll still identify as a Bosnian or as a Serb or as a Croat. So, yeah, that was your very quick geography lesson. I hope it wasn't too intense that you zoned out. But if it was, I forgive you because I did that a lot in school too. And I just want you to know that when Kathy and I learned we were going to Bosnia, we were living in Dowsville and serving at the Alliance Church in Dowsville and in Nelliston, down in the Mohawk River Valley, and Dowsville is up by the edge of the Adirondacks. And so I went down to the Utica Library because Utica had a lot of Bosnians. And I took out a whole stack of books so I could learn about Bosnians because they had the books at the Utica Library. And I have to admit, trying to learn all of this stuff in a crash course before we went to Bosnia was almost useless. So if you say, wow, he really knows a lot about Bosnia, it's because we've picked it up little by little for 20 years. So it's not because my brain is out to here. It's just because we listen well. So don't feel ashamed if you don't know stuff about other parts of the world. But if you meet people from other parts of the world, spend time with them, ask them questions, and then you'll start to grow your fund of information. So I wanted to look tonight at the 107th Psalm, and I wanted to begin with this word, which I think sums up the 107th Psalm, and it is this: the author of life writes himself into the stories of those he has imagined in order to bring their stories to completion. The Redeemer stretches out his hand to those who need help. The Creator bends his ear to the created. And that is the essence of what Psalm 107 is celebrating. Psalm 107 is a celebration and a meditation on the God who rescues. The God who rescues. And In it, it has 4 stories of rescue. And I'm going to read the introduction and the first story for you here. And you can see it. It says, "Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his steadfast love endures forever. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, whom he has redeemed from trouble, and gathered in from the lands, from the east and from the west, from the north and from the south." And then that's the intro. Now here's the first story of rescue. "Some wandered in desert wastes, finding no way to a city to dwell in. Hungry and thirsty, their soul fainted within them. Then they cried to the Lord in their trouble, and he delivered them from their distress. He led them by a straight way till they reached a city to dwell in. Let them thank the Lord for his steadfast love, for his wondrous works to the children of man. For he satisfies the longing soul, and the hungry soul he fills with good things." I chose this story, this first scene from Psalm 107, the one that I call the one that where God is rescuing the wanderers or the people who are lost. Because during this last term in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kathy and I have come across a lot of wanderers. Next slide, please. That's Kathy on the left. You probably recognize her. And the little woman to her right is Nina. Nina, we met 3 years ago when we started traveling to the city of Doughboy. Doughboy was an hour and 10 minutes north of us. And it was the first ministry city that we went to regularly where the population was Serbian, majority Serbian. It was, and so we got to hear people's stories from the war from a completely different perspective. And at our first prayer meeting there in Doughboy, we would go on Wednesday nights. They had prayer meeting. We would try to get there early so we could visit some of the families in the town. And I would fill in the pulpit there once a month because their regular pastor lives over an hour away in the city of Banja Luka. And so we were coming up to encourage their congregation and also to help out their pastor. So we heard Nina's story, and it goes like this. She was born in a city that is now in the Ukraine, and she was raised in an orphanage. And she was a very good student, so she got employed very quickly after she turned 18. And as she was employed there in the Ukraine, she met a businessman who came over from Yugoslavia to do business in the former Soviet Union. And they met, they fell in love, they married, and he took her back with him to Yugoslavia. And they settled near the city of Zagreb. There they had 2 children. And I believe that was around the 1960s when they met. And then the war happened at the beginning of the 90s. There was a point toward the end of the war where they fled for their lives from Zagreb. And of all places to flee, they fled to Bosnia. Well, Bosnia was in the middle of a war too. So you might ask, well, why did they flee to Bosnia? Well, they fled to the Serbian part of Bosnia, which was just across the border from Croatia, and they fled there because Nina's husband was Serbian by background, and that's why they did not feel safe. When they got to Bosnia during the war as refugees, they checked into the police station, as you're supposed to do whenever you move in many parts of Europe. And they took down their information, and since their documents were issued in Croatia, they tore up their identity papers and threw them in the trash. They said, "We don't recognize that country." And shortly after that, Nina was widowed. And so that very first prayer meeting, and almost every prayer meeting after that, when we would go up, one of our prayer requests was always, we need to pray for Nina that she will have her visa renewed this year. And Kathy and I knew what that was like because we have to renew our visa every year in Bosnia-Herzegovina. And it's a huge process, and we always, you have to get a lot of paperwork together, and that bothers me because I'm not a detail person. But I'm the one that always does it because Kathy is intimidated by going into government buildings. And so even though she's the detail person, I'm the one that's got to go and take all the paperwork and run around town and do different things. So we get our papers together also every year for our visa, and we go in and we show them our passport, that it's current and that it will be valid past the time that we're expecting the visa for. We come in with a letter from the Christian Missionary Alliance that says we will cover their medical expenses and their housing and those things. We come with a letter of guarantee from the local church that we partner with that says, if for any reason they need to be repatriated and they can't afford to do it themselves, we will cover the costs so that they are not a burden on the government. And so we have all these papers that we bring to the office. But in the back of my mind, even though I have all my boxes checked off, I've got all these forms here, they're in order. In the back of my mind, I always think, has the law changed this year and I don't know about it, and for some reason I can't get a visa? Because that's happened a few times. They've changed the law, and then they're like, well, we don't know what category you fit anymore. You might have to go home. Or is the law the same, but the people in charge in the ministries, if after an election or something, sometimes if a different party comes into power, they look at foreigners differently. And so they might say, yeah, we don't want to grant those visas anymore. You're happily invited to leave. So every year, we get right around the time we have to do our visa paperwork, we pray for it, we have extra stress, but we have the documentation. Imagine you're Nina. Her only identification is an expired red passport from a country that no longer exists. Next slide, please. The man in the white trousers and the dark blue shirt is named Pastor Peter. Pastor Peter I met just over a year ago at a prayer meeting in Sarajevo. And Pastor Peter is a refugee from Pakistan. He and his families are believers, and they began to meet with other believers in Pakistan until their lives were threatened. And so he decided, I will go to Germany. I will apply for asylum because we are being threatened. We have a valid claim. And as soon as I gain asylum, I will send for the rest of my family. Well, he is stuck along with about 20,000 other refugees in Bosnia-Herzegovina. 4 countries and 800 miles away from Germany. Next slide, please. The man in the purple Adidas jacket, his name is Jairo. I've known Jairo for at least 15 years, ever since I lived in the city of Breza. He's not a typical wanderer like the other 2 I mentioned. But his people are wanderers because he is Roma. He comes from a gypsy background. But as I said, most Roma in Bosnia-Herzegovina are settled. And they have homes, and they've learned the local language. So when I speak with Jairo, I speak to him in the Roma language. In fact, I'm not even sure that Jairo knows the Roma language because he was born in Bosnia. I'm certain his grandparents do, though. Jairo was working at the church and in the town of Breza, about an hour from where Kathy and I live in Zenica. And he was doing work around the church, and they were cleaning rugs. And they had taken some rugs out on the terrace, and they shampooed them. And Then after we shampoo them, we rinse them with water, and then you squeegee them dry, and then you hang them up to dry completely. And he was squeegeeing rugs, and he had his whole weight on the squeegee, and it slipped. And he went flying between the railing on the balcony and the floor of the balcony and went out and landed on the ground down one flight below. He broke 6 ribs, punctured a lung, and started bleeding internally. The other 3 stories in Psalm 107, I'll list them off for you in case you're interested. The second rescue story, it says there were people who were imprisoned in iron chains because of disobedience. The third story, it says there were some who were at death's door. They were in such bad shape they didn't even want to eat food or take in water. And in that case, it says it's because of their own foolishness. And then in the last case, it just says there were some sailors that went out to sea in order to earn a living. But while they were out to sea, the storm was brewed, and it was so ferocious that they tottered back and forth like drunken men, and they feared for their lives. And just like I read in verse 6 in the first psalm, where it says, well, let me read it so I don't misquote it. Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he delivered them from their distress. That's in the first verse 6. But it's repeated 3 more times in the psalm. And each one of those stories, in the center of the story, it says they cried out to the Lord in their distress, and he delivered them he rescued them from their trouble. And all of those situations. So, we were crying out to the Lord for Nina. And God has been merciful to her. At some point, a woman came to live in her town of Doughboy from the Netherlands. And she opened up an orphanage, just a home for 7 or 8 kids, but for kids without parents. And she had such a good reputation with the local authorities that if she had an opening and social services had to remove a child from a home for a situation, the first place they would want to put the child was in that woman's home. And if somebody left an abandoned infant somewhere, if they had an opening at that home, they would take the infant there. And one of Nina's favorite jobs was to nurse and swaddle, feed and swaddle newborn babies that came into her care. And because she was connected, working as a volunteer at that orphanage, the police had mercy on her and would continue to renew her visa. And it was another way that she could earn some spending money, even though she was working under the table. The police kind of looked the other way because they knew Nina needed help, and they really appreciated the work that they were doing in that home. But then COVID came. And during our lockdown, everyone under 18 and everyone over 65 were forbidden to leave their home for 2 months. Can you imagine? So she couldn't go to work anymore. And we know of a number of cases like this. And so thanks to people like you who give to the Great Commission Fund, and some also of you who give to Comma Services or Compassion and Mercy Associates, which is a relief and development arm of the Christian and Missionary Alliance. Because of people who gave to the CMA and to Compassion and Missionary Associates, we were able to put food packets together for people like Nina and others who were in need. And so we delivered food packets to them, and we're able to reach out in Jesus' name to people in need. Pastor Peter, in his situation, Christians in Sarajevo opened up an apartment for him to stay. And he finally decided to apply for asylum in Bosnia-Herzegovina. But you can continue to pray for him because he still doesn't know. Will they grant his asylum? Almost always the first request for asylum is denied, and then you have to go through a lengthy and costly appeal process. So keep praying for him. And in the meantime, pray for his family. His family's still in danger, and his son is even in prison right now, being investigated after some false charges were laid against him. So pray for that family and that whole situation. But the amazing thing with Pastor Peter, when he's able to get into the camp, he has a knack of finding other believers in Jesus Christ from his part of the world in the camp. And you can imagine, if you're in a refugee camp that's 99% Muslim, how many people are willing to say, I'm a believer? Especially if they know that that believer converted from Islam, because then their life is in danger. But he finds them. He's found a handful of Pakistani believers, and they reserve a meeting room at the refugee camp weekly where they have time in the Word, singing, and Bible study and prayer together. So God is answering our prayers for Pastor Peter, but keep praying for him. Jairo. So we heard about that Jairo had been whisked up to the regional hospital in the city where I live. So the first thing I did was call his pastor, who's bivocational and works down in Sarajevo. And I asked him, I said, hey, have you had a chance to visit Jairo yet? He said, no, I'm stuck with work. There's no way I can get up there. So I said, do you mind if we visit? He said, you have my blessing. So then I called our local pastor and asked Mario. I said, hey, have you heard about Jairo's situation? Yes, that's terrible. I said, have you had a chance to visit? He said, no. I'm stuck in Vadesh for 2 days. I have some house visits I have to do up here. So I said, well, do you mind if I go? And he said, you have my blessing. So double blessed, I went to the hospital. I went to the urgent care part of the hospital. And when you go into the hospital and you start to enter a ward, there's always a very stern head nurse somewhere near the entrance. And so as I started to walk into the ward, she came up to me and said, who are you here to see? And I introduced myself formally. I said, my name is Mark Eikost. I come in the name of the Evangelical Church of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and I'm here to visit Hayrudin Beslic. She looked me right in the eye. She paused a couple seconds, and she said, you have 5 minutes. And I knew she was serious, and I knew from that also that his situation was serious, because usually if they'll let you visit, then people bring coffee, they sit down and they talk together, they spend a half hour or an hour together. But I knew this was a serious situation. So I walked into his room, and in his room there were 6 beds in the whole room. But his was right across the entryway. And so as soon as I walked in, he was laying in his bed, I should say, and just his head was up because the pillow was behind it. But everything else was perfectly flat. But when he recognized me, I saw the corners of his mouth go up in greeting. And so I walked up to him, and we greeted one another, and he told me a story. He said, Mark, I broke 6 ribs. I punctured my lung. I was bleeding so much internally. As soon as I got here, they sent me into surgery. They gave me 4 or 5 units of blood. He said they were able to stop the bleeding. They were able to reinflate the lung. But he said, the problem is now I'm in such pain. I'm in such pain I can't even sit up. And so I said, yeah. I grabbed my Bible. And I remembered what the nurse said, 5 minutes. So I opened the Psalms. I read a portion of a psalm, and I began to pray. And before I was even finished with my short prayer, the head nurse was behind me. So I knew she meant it. I needed to go. And so I did. I saw him 2 months later. He was home. He was recovered. And he said to me, Mark, you'll never guess what happened when you came to visit me. I said, what happened? He said, as soon as you left, the nurse said to me, Jairo, let's see if we can't get you up. And she took my arms and she put them around her neck. And then she put her arms around me and she began to lift. And he said, and I sat up. And then she said, let's see if you can't stand. And she pulled my legs over to the edge of the bed. She put her arms around me again and she stood up. And he said, and I stood up. And she let go and I was standing in my own strength. He said, my roommate in the bed across from me was so shocked. He said to me, Jairo, call the imam back into the room and let him recite for me too. Because his roommate assumed, since his name is Hairudin, that he's a Muslim. So he assumed that I was the local imam coming from the mosque and that I had opened up the Quran and read some magical verses to him. So when he told me that story, I was touched because it told me that God heard our prayers for Jairo and returned to him his strength and alleviated some of the pain so that he could sit up, so that he could stand. So I was really encouraged by that. But what encouraged me even more was what he said next. Jairo, remember, he's Roma. Most people look down on Roma. He never finished grade school. He's been a common laborer all of his life. It would be very, very easy for a Bosnian to look down on him and very common for that to happen. But Jairo looked at him and he said, Mark is not an imam. We worship Jesus together in the evangelical church. And if you want, I can pray for you. Isn't that awesome? And when I heard that story, I mean, that's one of my highlights, Becky. But I didn't want to share it before because I was waiting for now. Because it's happening. People are connecting to Jesus. And as they're connecting to Jesus, they're finding out that he is good and that he gives them a status that they've never had before. And he gives them a hope for eternity. I forgot to mention, after the lockdown, like the month of May, toward the end of May, we were able to finally have open church services again. And some churches still decided to wait a little, like here, and others decided right away, nope, we're going to have services again. And so Kathy and I were able to go back up to Doughboy and see Nina just before we flew back. And she had wonderful news for us. It wasn't just that her visa was granted. She was granted citizenship. And just last week, I got a message from her. She had already received her passport and her Medicare card. She's so excited. And she said, keep praying for me. She said, now I can travel to Croatia and try to and apply for the pension that I should be getting because of the time that my husband worked there in Croatia. And so please pray for her, because you can probably understand that most of the companies are not doing really well, so they can't really afford to give out a lot of pensions. So if you have a missing form, you didn't fill out the form right, they'll just send you on your way, hoping that the people will run out of money to get all the forms together and to come back again. So please pray that she has favor and that she can get her pension. And continue to pray. She told me that her son-in-law, her daughter is married to a Bosnian Serb. Her son-in-law has COVID, and he was on a respirator. And the last I heard, they've given him only a 20% chance to survive. So pray for him as well. Let's keep calling out in our distress for him as well. And his name is Ranko. So if the Lord puts that on your heart during your quiet time or whatever, pray for Ranko. God is an awesome God. Maybe you noticed when I read verse 6, then they cried to the Lord in their trouble. I always emphasize the word Lord. When you read it in the Old Testament, in a lot of our English translations, it will be spelled capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D. And that is so that we know when we read it in all caps, the word Lord, what it really means is the Hebrew covenant name of God, the name that God revealed to Moses from the burning bush. I am Yahweh, I am who I am. The point there is that God wants us to call out to him in our trouble, but he particularly wants us to know him, to know who he is. And that was during the time of the Old Testament. In the time of the New Testament, God revealed himself to the people of Israel through his son, Jesus. Next slide, please. If you go through the Gospel of Mark and just read the first 4 chapters, you'll see a lot of miracles that Jesus does. And if you compare them with the 4 stories in Psalm 107, you'll see a lot of parallels. But the climax is when the disciples are in the boat with Jesus and the storm happens. And Jesus is sleeping. And they wake him up and they say, "Don't you care that we're dying?" And then it says in Mark 4:39, "And he awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, 'Peace, be still.' And the wind ceased, and there was great calm." And it says the disciples were astonished and afraid, and they asked themselves, "Who is this that even the wind and the sea obey him?" Well, he's the same one mentioned in Psalm 107:29. He made the storm be still, and the waves of the sea were hushed. So God enters into the stories of people who are distressed. But he doesn't do it just because he's merciful. He does it because he's loving. He wants to be known. How does he do that today? Where are Jesus' hands and feet today? Here they are. There they are. We are Jesus' hands and feet. The job is unfinished. There are still many, many people that don't know him. And we know there are many, many people who are in distress. And we are not only called, but empowered to go out in Jesus' name and make a difference in their lives. Not for our glory, but for his glory, so that he will be known. And I want to thank you for making it possible for Kathy and I and for others who have the opportunity to go and tell others about Jesus, to reach out to people who are in distress and to make a difference in their lives. And I want to encourage you and to remind you that you are called and empowered to do the same thing here. We are his hands and his feet. The author of life is writing himself into the stories of those he has imagined in order to bring their lives to completion. And sometimes he uses you and I as the pen with which he writes. Thank you. You want me to stay here? All right, I'm staying here.
Thank you so much, Mark, for sharing your heart. Wow. It's hard to think of all that I wanted to say to end us up here, but it's interesting that this morning's service, which some of you might not have watched yet online, Pastor PJ, and what you just talked about correlating. So make sure you watch this morning's service if you haven't, if you weren't present there. But I think God has a theme for us today. We're supposed to hear these messages and that we are the hands and feet and that God works in these ways, in these miracles. So let's review the 3 people we're going to pray for. First one, Nina. Second one, Pastor Peter. And third one,
Hiro.
Hiro. We said it right? Hiro. Okay, remember high and row. Okay, that'll help you remember. Sorry. Okay, then.
Always a teacher.
Gotta remember these things. I have to remember. The second thing I want to do is I feel like we should engage. We're here. He came all the way from Bosnia, and I'd like to engage our hands and feet. Instead of sitting, I know at home you have a computer and you're probably ethered off to some cord or whatever you call that word. But I'd like us to stand and come forward. I know we have to have our social distance. So why don't we all, we've never used this whole thing, okay? Let's go all the way to there and all the way to here, socially distanced, because there's not that many of us. There's about 20. I think we can stay apart. And we are going to be the hands and feet for Mark tonight, okay? So let's just make a physical point with our body to come forward and say that we're with you in Bosnia, okay?
Thank
and you
you.
can sit or you can stand with us. Why don't you stand with us here?
I'll put
and
my
I'll
mask
stand
on.
here. Put our masks on, sure. And then we will stand. Those of you at home can do the same thing, and we're going to pray and close up tonight, but we're standing here as a physical reminder to you, Mark and Kathy, that you are not alone,
Thank you.
that Auburn Alliance is with you, and we will be hands and feet and pens, and I love how God wrote his story in. So yeah, we can go all the way down if you
And
don't want
in
to get too
Geneva.
close. And Geneva. And normally I'd want to lay hands and pray for you that way, but we'll just do it socially distanced, and let's pray and close.
Oh, and Ronco. Ronco is Nina's son.
Yes,
who's sick.
Ronco. I wrote that down. R-O-N-C-O, son-in-law of
R-A-N-C-O,
Nina.
yeah.
What?
R-A-N-K-O.
R-A-N-K-O, son-in-law of Nina, who has COVID and maybe 20% chance. So let's really lift him up in prayer.
Yeah.
Father, thank you so much for these words that your servant Mark has given to us tonight. Father, I praise you that you don't have an imam there. You have a Jesus man and woman in blood and flesh and body who love you and who are serving there, Lord. And I praise you for that you have your worker. We call them our international workers now. You have your international workers there doing your work, and that's exactly what we are. We are the hands and feet to that, Lord. We are a part of it. Within the Christian Missionary Alliance, we feel as though we're a three-corded thread that is bound together, Lord, with our prayer support, with our giving, and with our actual workers that go. We become a strong cord that is going to these countries. And for Bosnia tonight, we stand here to make a statement that we are with the Eikost in Bosnia, and we are here to proclaim these requests that Mark has asked us for tonight. So for Ronco first, I pray that you would be with him in the hospital within not only his body, but his spirit, Lord. If his time is going to come to an end and you see that that is best for him, Father, I pray that you would speak to his spirit now through Nina, through anyone who is able to be with him. I hope he's not alone. I pray that he has people around him, and I pray that he is able to know you. I thank you for Jairo, who is totally reaching out, the hands and feet to people around him, and telling this other person in the hospital that he is a Christian. I praise you, Lord, for that, and only because someone shared with him. I pray for Nina and this situation with the visa, for the to finish the story. I pray that as Mark comes back again, that we would even hear maybe while he's here, that the story is finished and that her visa is secured. We commit this to you, Father, and we ask for it. And for Pastor Peter and the things that need to take place in his life to finish his story for your glory. We commit these things to you, and we ask you to encourage Mark and Kathy in their work, and we praise them. We praise you for all you have done through them. We give you the glory tonight, Lord, and we ask all this in your precious name. Amen.
Thanks, Becky.
Thanks for coming, and we'll see you. Goodbye to who? Everybody. Goodbye. Turn